Okay, good morning everyone. We move forward with our discussion regarding ethics. I hope you have had a chance to reflect on the question of what is ethics and find a solution based on what we discussed, and in addition to that, whatever you have thought of added to that, particularly in terms of examples, because I'll keep saying this, that examples will help you get better insights and clarify your own thoughts in addition to whatever pointers I give you. So in some way we are now moving forward into a more critical, I would say, a very critical, very important segment of our discussion, which is why ethics. Of course, as you can see, these diagrams will remain more or less throughout our discussions, just as a reminder that ethics are guidelines for behavior, which help us distinguish between good, bad, fair, unfair, just, unjust, and behavior, of course, is each one of us, I, interacting with other people and nature. And similarly, the equation which reminds us that aggregation of individual behavior becomes the group behavior, whatever may be the size of the group. Classroom, state, nation. I could talk to you about the hierarchy of living systems, but maybe some other time. So basically, these diagrams I'll try to keep in every lecture, but now we move forward into why ethics. And as I said, it's a very important part of our discussions, because as I mentioned pretty much in the beginning, the reason we are discussing ethics is not limited to maybe allowing you to pass some exam or write an essay. The effort and the motivation I have is to tell you about ethics enough in the right manner so that you can imbibe it and actually behave ethically and make it part of your behavioral pattern. So that is why it becomes very important to justify or to convince you that ethics are important. And just my saying so is not going to help, because unless you are motivated, you have the inner drive to behave in a particular manner, in an ethical manner, whatever I say, whatever other people say, whatever has been written by n number of wise people, leaders, it will not help. You have to accept, you have to convince yourself that ethical behavior is the right way to go. Of course, I'll try to give you some pointers again, some logic, some reasoning, and some effort to convince you that ethical behavior is the right behavior. Now, when I am with a live audience, like I mentioned earlier, I convert a big group into smaller groups and give them task. In this particular context, the task consists of answering two questions: why we should behave ethically, and the second question is why people behave unethically. So there is a little subtle change in wording. First question is why we should behave ethically. Second question is why people behave unethically, and I leave it to you to guess why this differentiation in wording. Now, usually, since I have been doing this for a while, I can say with reasonable confidence that there are some common answers. Why we should behave ethically, peace of mind, image, a sense of being role models to others, which again we'll touch upon. Why people behave unethically, there are again several common answers. One is greed, shortcuts, wanting to get more than the efforts justify, make less effort and get more rewards. So, these are in some way they can all probably be summarized under the word greed, and that's one of the biggest motivators for unethical behavior. So, as I said, unless you are convinced from within that ethical behavior is the right way to go, it doesn't matter who somebody else says, what somebody else says. So, that is where I'll try to present some models. I'm just using models in a very loose manner, but some logical arguments to try to convince you that ethical behavior is the right way to go. Now, it has been demonstrated, researched, concluded that we are all human beings. As human beings, we are all driven by self-interest. Something which is of our interest, we do that with great deal of motivation. If it is not in our interest, it requires maybe a lot of cajoling and other kind of forces to behave in that manner. So, when I talk to you about why ethics, I'll try to link it up with your own self-interest, whatever role you may have in life now in future. Now, am I asking you to be selfish? In a way, yes. But let me illustrate the finer aspects, the nuances to selfishness by a story. And the story relates to two situations. There is an old lady walking along the road, and one young man comes, snatches her purse and runs away. Now, obviously, the old lady is perturbed, maybe she feels hurt, she may have fallen down, surely she has a sense of loss. The young man, of course, rifles through the purse and finds some cash, maybe a mobile, whatever. So, this is situation 1. Situation 2 is somewhat similar. There is an old lady walking along the road. She wants to cross the road, and a young man comes and helps her cross the road through the traffic. Now, what happens? Old lady gets across the road. The young man feels good. So, in a way, it is a selfish act. He feels good that I did my good deed of the day. I helped this old lady cross the road. Now, in a very nitpicky way, both are selfish acts. Okay? In the situation 1, young man gained some cash, some other artifacts, maybe cell phone, etc. In the second case, the young man gained a sense of satisfaction, a sense of achievement that I did this. So, in a very nitpicky way, as I said, both are selfish acts. But if you think carefully, there is one big major difference between the two selfish acts. In situation 1, it is a win-lose situation. Young man gained something, but poor old lady, she lost something, including maybe a sense of fear, injury. In the second case, the young man gained a sense of satisfaction, achievement, good deed of the day, and the old lady could safely cross the road. So, in management jargon, we could characterize the first situation, the first behavior as a win-lose situation. And in the second case, in the second part of the story, there is a win-win situation. Both the protagonists, both the stakeholders, they benefited. In the first case, one stakeholder lost, another stakeholder or protagonist gained. So, by and large, even if we act out of self-interest, it could be ethical as long as it's a win-win situation that you create through your behavior. So, again, these are broad indicators of how we try to answer why ethics. And let's now move forward to, as I said, some of the models which I try to use to convince anybody, including you, that ethical behavior is the right way to go. And this is a very hardcore economic model, economic justification for ethical behavior. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, my main focus has been on teaching ethics to MBA students. Of course, the subjects usually are labeled as business ethics, etc. But I try to, and I think sufficient justification for that, to use ethics generically. So, I discuss ethics as applicable to human beings, and then create a narrower focus on ethics for MBAs, which is business ethics. And just to share with you quickly why this kind of a sequential approach. Now, and this is again a classic example that I give. As we move forward in life from birth to our departure from planet Earth, we go through many roles. We are school students, we go to college, we come to an MBA kind of program, or anything, engineering, medicine, law, accounts. So, there are different streams through which people grow and go forward. Then as they take up jobs, even let us narrow it down to MBAs, they may specialize in marketing, finance, HR, operations, whatever. And some of them may join a bank, some may join a FMCG company, some may join a media house, who knows. So, there is a great deal of diversity in roles, streams, the disciplines we learn. But let me point out that there is one commonality which will never leave you, me, anybody, and that is our being human. When we are born, we are a human being until we are on planet Earth. That will not change, will remain human beings. So, that's why my approach of discussing ethics, talking about ethics, first as relating to us as human beings, and then of course a special situation where some students are training to be MBAs, aspiring to be managers. First maybe they join as a trainee executive, become middle manager people, and so on. And there may be many changes, the hierarchical progression, switching jobs from one domain to the other. I cite the example of a professor of mine from my engineering days who after some years became a sannyasi. So, he left teaching, engineering, everything, and became an ascetic. So, point I am making is that we may go through all these transitions, changes, some small, some big, but we will remain human beings. And that's how I like to relate ethics to us as human beings. And then, of course, whatever role we are in will have some special features, and more of that will come probably when we discuss how ethics. But as far as what and why are concerned, we'll continue to address the topic as generic human beings, with of course examples to illustrate, and those examples by necessity have to be of a given situation. So let me go back to my interacting with MBA students, and then we'll generalize from there. Now, as I ask various batches year after year, and of course most of my teaching is done with second year MBA students in the fourth semester, and they are mainly at the stage concerned about jobs, placement, getting a good job, and of course I provoke them to talk about what is a good job, but that's a separate topic, and if needed we'll touch that again. Basic thing is jobs. Everybody is looking for jobs. Now, just to continue with that particular domain and the example, in Pune alone, and the statistics could vary, there may be easily about 100 MBA programs. Numbers keep changing depending on demand, supply, perceptions. So, if we take a very conservative figure of 100 MBA programs in Pune alone, and take a very small conservative batch size of 60 students. So, roughly 60 into 100, 6,000 MBAs are coming into the job market every year. And I am not talking about state level, national level, which then can go into lakhs. And they are all looking for similar kind of jobs, similar companies, similar roles, good remuneration, etc., etc. And then I pose the question, where do these jobs come from? I mean, everybody is looking for jobs, but where do the jobs come from? And usually there is some hesitation, some brainstorming. So let me not, obviously cannot take you through that process, but essentially jobs come through economic growth. Okay? If an existing company expands, if a new company is set up, then they create jobs, and there is a demand for more people, and specifically, as I said, I am using the example of MBAs. And then of course there is a little bit of probably demand created by attrition. People retire, they move out of a specific geographic area. Some people of course leave planet Earth. So that does create a little bit of additional demand for people and create jobs. But basically the main driver of job growth is economic growth. As I said, companies expand, open a new branch, set up a new plant, new company comes into being and says, okay, like what the current buzzword is, startups. And startups of course also need people at various levels. So I hope you are able to understand that there is a direct link between jobs, for which lot of people, most people are aspiring, and economic growth. So Let me slightly shift tracks here and make a statement that any human activity, any human endeavor takes place in a geographic location. If I am standing here talking to you, it's the center under RUSA. If there are people outside who are watching and monitoring and making sure that everything is going all right, they are located in that room. If I am teaching an MBA batch, then I am in the classroom. If somebody is setting up a factory, it has to happen in a physical location. So, please be very clear, because it's important for the argument I am going to make, that any human action endeavor takes place in a physical geographical location. Okay. So, let us take the example of an entrepreneur wanting to set up a new factory. Let us take a brick and mortar kind of example. It could be an IT industry, it could be a hotel, which is service industry, it could be a hospital, which is a different kind of service industry or enterprise. But enterprise needs a place to come into existence. And let me give you some examples. You may or may not agree with the examples I am using, which is all right, but I hope that if you are convinced of the generic logic, you will be able to come up with examples that you agree with or you are kind of convinced about. So, I talk about an entrepreneur wanting to set up an industry which will create jobs. Now, again, as I said, with all caveats, suppose I am a venture capitalist and have a few crores, I don't have, but let us assume, few crores with me to be given to some entrepreneur as part of his capital. And now the venture capitalist comes and tells me that he is going to open a factory in Kashmir. Now, as a venture capitalist, I'll be very, very hesitant. I hope you understand why. I will not go into details. Basically, an entrepreneur, and in some way venture capitalist also is an entrepreneur, they are willing to take risks, but I don't think any reasonable, rational entrepreneur will take unnecessary risks. So, if there is a geographically unstable location, and I just use Kashmir as an example, media tells us, and it's not my imagination, that almost 25% of the districts in India are affected by the Naxal movements, and there is a law and order question mark, there is a situation where things may not work in a very stable manner, yeah, and so on. Again, there are several states. There is one particular state in India which I would not name, just to be very cautious, where at some stage kidnapping became an industry. So, a rich businessman, his son or daughter would be kidnapped, and then the ransom demand would come and money would be paid and the child would be back home. So, in those kind of locations, and I could give you many examples, some of them are rather graphic, so let us avoid that. Point I am making is that there are locations in our country where it would be more than reasonable risk to start a industry or an enterprise. So, that gives you some idea of what is needed for an enterprise or for a industry to grow. And there are other examples. During the British days, West Bengal was the financial capital. Calcutta was the financial capital of our country. But down the line, most industries moved out of West Bengal. Again, you can look up the reasons for it. Should not be too difficult to find. More recently, Tatas were to set up a plant in West Bengal. They couldn't, so the plant went to Gujarat. Few examples just to illustrate the point, which I will now put down in the form of a diagram. And please pay attention. So, as we discussed, jobs are needed, expected, wanted. Jobs will come only through economic growth. And I have tried to tell you through examples, and again think about it for yourself. Economic growth will happen only in a stable environment. I'm using just one word, stability. It encompasses law and order, ease of doing business, good infrastructure, educational facilities for children, etc., etc., healthcare. Yeah. So I'm kind of putting all together all that spectrum of what would facilitate economic growth as stability, and I don't think you need to be an Einstein to understand that stability will come only through ethical behavior. If more or less people are law abiding, they keep their promises. If there is a vendor supplying to a company, he sticks to his delivery schedule, his price, his quality. If that doesn't happen, then the stability will be lost and economic growth will be negatively impacted, which means lesser jobs or no jobs. Okay. So let me repeat. People want jobs, yeah, either whether mid-career professionals or fresh graduates or whatever. Jobs can come only through economic growth. Economic growth will happen only in situations where there is stability, and stability demands, stability can come about only if there is a predominant ethical behavior in the society, in the location, in whatever you call it, district, nation. Yeah. So even if you move it to a mid-career professional, you may say, oh, he or she is not looking for a job. I'm sure people want advancement in their jobs. I don't think there will be any rational human being who will say that, oh, I am quite content to be a junior manager. We all look for career growth, advancements, better economic and other kinds of rewards, yeah, and the same logic applies. A company cannot give you more remuneration unless it is making profits, yeah, and it cannot make profits without economic growth taking place, yeah. It's like what Henry Ford is supposed to have said, that I pay my workers more so that they can buy my products. Yeah? So prosperity, stability, advancement in the society can help the company grow, and in turn they can reward their employees, they can offer more jobs. Okay? So I hope you fully understand now the hardcore economic logic for ethical behavior. I am not proposing that you behave ethically and then you will go to heaven. It may happen, I don't know. But please try to understand that in your own self-interest, you want economic growth, you want economic prosperity, you want economic advancement. It cannot come unless there is stability, and stability will not come unless there is ethical behavior. So let me look at it from a different perspective. FDI, foreign direct investment, has been in the news more recently, quite prominently, with government opening several sectors to 100% FDI. Now, same thing. I mean, suppose, to transpose the example I gave earlier, I am a investor sitting in New York and I have, say, $100 million to invest. Now, I can go to China, I can go to Indonesia, I can go to Bangladesh, I can go to Ireland, anywhere in the world. Why should I come to India? I will come to India only if I am sure that there is only a reasonable risk in terms of investing my money. Okay? So, economic growth to be driven by FDI, foreign direct investment, also follows the same logic. You have to provide a stable environment, you have to provide an environment where ethical behavior dominates. So, internal economic processes influenced by overseas linkages in this world of globalization, everything requires a basic foundation of ethical behavior. Let me give you a very personal example regarding this FDI business. A few years ago, I decided that I will become an entrepreneur and not remain in a job mode. So I thought what kind of entrepreneur I could become. I definitely did not have capital. So I said, okay, maybe a job or a role as a representative or as an agent, middleman could work for me. And again we talked about FDI just now. So I reached out to some of my batchmates from MIT, TPP, and I said, look, if you need anybody who can be your man on the spot in India, then I am the right man for that role. Some people did not even respond to my approach, but there's a good friend of mine called Bill. I won't give you the full name. He said, yes, Shashi, it looks very feasible, and given the dollar-rupee rate, if we give you X dollars per month, we can get much more out of it than actually sending an American to India. I said, great. And then there was a long silence. Nothing happened. And you see, by and large, Americans, and surely Bill is a very professional person, and professional persons by definition communicate in time and when needed. So there was a long silence. So finally I sent him a reminder that, Bill, we were discussing about this possibility of my representing your company in India, and you're giving me some reward for that role. So he said, this time he responded, he said, look, Shashi, I'm sorry that I have been late in responding, but I was hesitating because there was a very negative comment from my top management. They said, no, India is not the place where we can do business ethically, so we are not going to go there. And my personal loss because of the perception of India as an unethical place to do business, and I lost that opportunity. So anyway, that's a very kind of in a lighter vein you could say, but to emphasize once again that if you want jobs, if you want career growth, if you want rewards in your career of promotions, better remuneration, there is no alternative but to have a stable environment, and to that there is no alternative other than predominantly ethical behavior. So I hope that this hardcore economic logic linking your self-interest with ethical behavior is something which appeals to you. Would request you to think about it, and not only think about it but internalize it and hopefully use that to guide your own behavior. Thank you.